Hello everybody and welcome back to Higher Learning Test Prep's online video tutorial series. Today we're going to take a look at the last three questions in the error identification format on a given test. Now these should be the hardest questions on the test. They're a little bit different than the normal questions we see. So let's take a look at how we're going to get these last three right. Number 27 reads, because of the exceptionally hilly terrain, the final miles of the race course were difficult for the other runners and me. Well, instantly, I think the me sticks out. People look at that and they think, that sounds wrong. We've been told our whole lives it's the other runners and I. However, this is not a mistake. Here's why. This is the objective version of the pronoun. So if it's the subject of the sentence, we're going to use I. If it's not the subject, we're going to use me. In this sentence, the final miles of the race course were difficult for the other runners and me. Well, the verb is were difficult for the other runners and me. Well, this whole prepositional phrase, for the other runners and me, is just modifying the word difficult. So the subject here, the final miles, well, that's the subject. Me is not taking the place of this subject. So it's correctly using me, no error. The short rule to remember here is that I is oftentimes wrong at the end of a test when it seems right. Me is oftentimes right at the end of the test when it seems wrong. So just keep in mind that I and me have specific uses and don't just go by sound on this one. Okay, number 28. The 7th-month-old baby was considered precocious to her family because she was already able to grasp tiny items delicately between her thumb and forefinger. Okay, so typically we go through and we look at the verbs and we make sure that the verbs match up, then we make sure the pronouns match up. The mistake here is not a common mistake. To her family. This is a prepositional phrase similar to for the other runners and me. However, she's not considered precocious to her family. She's considered precocious by her family. Precocious means that you're developing to be really intelligent at a really early age. So her family considers her precocious. She is considered precocious by her family. So this is an idiomatic mistake with the word to. Not a mistake you're going to see early on in the section. Definitely something you'll see near the end. This is the only part of the grammar section you should answer according to how it sounds. That is, prepositions oftentimes stick out to your ear and sound incorrectly if you're a native speaker. Okay, last one. To those of us who had heard the principal of the high school talk about the budget, the news of the staff cuts was not surprising. Okay, well, again, typically we look for verbs, pronouns, comparisons. Actually, the only thing that sounds at all weird here is to those of us who had heard about the principal. So typically we might think for those of us. This is actually correctly used here. To those of us who had heard the principal of the high school talk about the budget, the news of the staff cuts was not surprising. The news, you could think of the phrase, it's news to me. The news was not surprising to those of us who had heard the principal of the high school talk about the budget. So maybe if you switch this sentence around, you can more easily hear that to works. Again, the news of the staff cuts was not surprising to those of us who had heard the principal of the high school talk about the budget. Everything's all good here, no error. Now, no error is oftentimes the answer on some of these last questions because things that appear wrong are not actually wrong. So, maybe the other mistake people run into is they think the news plural, but I think that sounds pretty okay, and you would probably find that the news was not surprising sounds good to you. Okay, so here's a good example of what happens at the end of the section. We have two no errors, here and here. We also had one mistake that was an idiomatic, stylistic mistake, a preposition mistake. These are the kind of things you're going to look out for. Remember, me is oftentimes used correctly, but it looks wrong. And if you have any other questions, give us a shout, www.higherlearningtestprep.com. Happy studying, folks.